All right, let's jump into the case. The first one you're going to walk us through has to do with a joint venture between two different companies. This is in the auto industry, and the need here is they needed to figure out some
Absolutely, absolutely. So I always like to call this one like the mixed marriage,
branding.
right? So it's like two different cultures coming together, and it really was true in every sense of the word, right? There were these two big conglomerates. They had very different ways of running their businesses. And this happened to be in the automotive spare parts industry, which I can attest to is a very, for lack of a better description, an intensely competitive space because you're dealing with the bigger brands who are fighting with product expertise, know-how, product itself, and then you're dealing with the local counterparts who, well, they fight with lower prices
Yeah.
and a good network, right? So I think the challenge here was manifold because, you had a new company, you had people from both sides, from two different companies and two different corporate cultures now becoming one team who had to work together. But you also had a new company, which you can rightfully attest to. There is zero brand awareness in the market. They don't have an actual identity or positioning to speak of. And within a very short time, they had to prove that they were going to be profitable, right? Which is no small feat by any means, right? So where did we come into the picture? We started basically by not designing a brochure first. We got everybody together on their teams, right? The executive team, the mid-level managers, the junior level managers at separate times, of course, right? And we did what we ran a diagnostic canvas, right? So what that basically means is, okay, well, what do you see as the strength of your company? And please do not talk about your product, all right?
Yeah.
What is it that you are trying to solve for your customer? Give us an understanding of this ecosystem that you are working in and how does that help the customer, right? And from doing this exercise, it was interesting to extract from them. Of course, some of them couldn't help themselves and they dropped all the patented products and all that. And we're like, okay, well, we'll get to that in a second, right? But what is it that you guys actually do that helps your customers, right? And from digging and continuously probing, what we actually uncovered was not that the strength was the people. The strength was they had people that used to be on the client side.
Okay.
Right? So they understood what the challenges were when the spare parts come into the production plant, into the assembly line, right? And it all goes back to producing more, reducing downtime, reducing inefficiencies, reducing errors, etc., right? And because they understood that process so well, they were equipped with the know-how and the experience and the solutions, which they then were able to package, and that's what they were able to sell to the customer as a key selling point, right? Whereas everybody else in the competitive ecosystem, which we also happen to look at, they were talking about products, right? We've got the best this, we've got the best that, we've got a patented solution, but come on, nobody cares about that, right? And so we took that and we used that as part of the relevant brand strategy we developed for them. We also then came up with the full brand identity, which was, if I do say so myself, exceptionally different from what the competitors looked like, right? Because it had to be. They had to stand out because they were smaller in terms of size compared to the competitors, right? But they were competing in the same space. They were going after the same RFPs, right? RFQs, et cetera, right? So that's how we...
Yeah, I was gonna say the positioning is very interesting, and it's funny how just there's a safety net in product, right?
Yes.
Any executive at the company who just kind of talks about product, it's safe. Sometimes they're completely right. Yes, they have a superior product or some technical part of how they're manufactured or distributed is better, but is that of interest to someone who doesn't really know and trust you yet? And, what I try to advise clients on is there's a time and a place to have that product war, meaning like you will go to combat and you're going to talk about your competitor's product. There's a time and a place. But if you have that conversation too early, people aren't ready for it. They're going to tune you out. How was that struggle to get them to align on that like unique positioning? Was it relatively easy? Did it hit them as like, oh my God, it's been in front of us the whole time? Or did you have to really drag them into it?
It was a process where they kind of knew that this was their unique selling point, but they had this, I'm going to call it like relevation, so an elevated revelation, right? They had that that relevation when we actually mapped it out for them in a workshop. And then they looked at that and took a step back, and we could see them like looking at each other like, yeah, that's it, right? And, it was interesting to see that unfold, because in the beginning, they all had different opinions, right?
Yeah.
They all agreed to a certain extent that it was their understanding of the customer's struggles that unified them, and there was something there. It was like, but I think what was missing there was the factor, and they needed to have that mapped out, diagrammed out, in order for them to understand that, right?
All right, so my next question, this is, I'm smiling. So those watching the video will see that I'm smiling, but the audio listeners clearly cannot. So just know that I'm smiling, audio listeners. So now you've got a good positioning. It's the decision that every marketer is faced with. Do you vet the positioning by talking to your customers, or do you just feel good about it in the launch? How did you guys proceed?
Yeah, so we did the latter, although we insisted that we needed to test it first. But this is one of these, as it tends to be, this is one of these situations where they said, look, we understand that you have to go through that process and it's the right way to do it, but we're a little bit on a time crunch, and we have to show somebody higher up, the board of directors, the CEO, somebody at Global HQ, that things are moving and that we are putting things out there and we're delivering. So unfortunately, against our advice, they just released that into the wild.
It's the most stressful time to be a marketer and faced with that decision, because everything just points to validate it. Even if you have to do it like the wrong way, meaning like, hey, just grab 10 customers and get their reaction as opposed to like formal focus groups. Every marketer is faced with that decision. That would be maybe we should add a part to the podcast. It's like betting. Everyone can bet on every case study. Did you validate it? And I'd say most times not. Most time there is such a sense of urgency and need or confidence by leadership that we got it right. But obviously that is so dangerous to do, because you can just spend a good 3 to 6 months implementing something and then realize, oh my God, we got it wrong. And now we've got to backtrack.
Absolutely. But I will add in one caveat there, Steve, that we said, okay, if you're the client, at the end of the day, it's your decision. This is what we recommend. Yeah. It's entirely up to you, but just know that we feel that this is the right way to do it. So we released that into the wild, but like 6 months later, we did tell them, let's go. Now that you've got some clients, you've got some traction, let's go and test that out and see if what we put out there resonates, right? We eventually did conduct that survey with some customers. And, of course, it's not always such a straightforward process, as you can rightfully attest to, because some people just flat out don't care.
Yeah.
Right? If they say it doesn't make any difference to me as long as they deliver a good product, right? So, and that goes back to why we understand, like, yes, we get it that the client wants to focus on the product, because their customers are out there saying, like, we don't care about your positioning. It's all about your product at the end of the day. But we did get some customers that we interviewed where they did really give us great feedback. And they said, well, yes, it resonates with me. However, maybe you might want to consider changing this and this. So they actually did take the time to provide us with that constructive feedback that we were looking for.
All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
It was the right decision later in the process, which is good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Anything else you want to share about the first case study?
Yes, indeed. I've done a couple of these brand rollouts, and the brand rollouts are only as good as the consistency and the follow-up and the regular, I'm not going to use the word policing, but like, the regular monitoring, right? And because we've been in situations before where the client insists, no, we just do it once and then that's it, right? And what we usually tend to see happening in the succeeding months is that if the brand is not properly monitored, people will just go ahead and do whatever they want, right? And we wanted to avoid that from happening with this kind of case because of the stakes that were involved. So what we did was, on the day that we actually launched the brand, we had a formal workshop at the headquarters where we involved obviously the members of the board, members of the marketing team, but more importantly, the marketing team went around and selected what they called brand champions. So people that are in a non-marketing function that were responsible for enforcing the brand and seeing that the brand is used properly, right? And the way that we did the brand rollout was we did it, or we communicated it as if we were sitting in their own shoes, or we were looking at this from their lens. And what that basically means in layman's terms is, why should somebody in HR or in accounting right, who's in charge of payroll, care about the brand?
Yep.
How is it relevant to them? Why should they care, and what's in it for them? So that's how we spun it in this rollout. And what we then did was every 3 or 4 months, we did a regular like brand workshop where we told them, okay, so this is the next step of the rollout. And this is what you should be looking out for. And this is why it's relevant to you. And these are the next steps. So everything was mapped out. There was a roadmap. There was an action plan. There was a calendar. And by doing it that way, and by having this regular and frequent communication, everybody was aligned, regardless of whether they were marketing or not, right? Because marketing or the brand team, they were the gatekeepers, right? They were the ones leading the initiative, but everybody else understood that they were a part of this exercise as well.